I danced through the bullshit, danced through the pain, danced through the dark when they forgot my name. Back to the wall, but I still stand tall. Unheard athlete, yeah. I danced through it all. I danced through it all.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Unheard Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Ellison Jordan. This is the second episode of this podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and joining. Much obliged, much appreciated. So in this episode, and for the next couple episodes, we're going to be talking about my high school journey from freshman to senior year. So this is part 1 of 4. So let's get right into it. So before going to Gilman, I had 2 other options. They were St. John's and DeMatha. So I had a top 3, Gilman, St. John's, and DeMatha. What stood out to me about Gilman was just academically, they were extremely strong. They're one of the best schools in the country. And we talk about kind of setting you up for the future. We talk about that 40-year plan. And during that time, they always talk about like how Gilman can set you up for a 40-year plan. And we kind of put that in the back of our minds when it came to choosing the school. Me and my family, we was like, maybe this could be something that we could focus on. Was a 40-year plan, and Gilman was definitely best for that. Was the best school for that academically, and athletically they were just as strong. They were one of the best teams in the country. Athletically, they were like top 15, top 20, top 25 in the country. They play high rate schedule. They play multiple opponents. They were nationally ranked. So it was a great opportunity for me to go to Gilman. Not saying St. John's or DeMatha weren't great schools. They're obviously great schools academically and athletically, but Gilman was just the best choice for me. Before going to Gilman, I never heard of Gilman. Like I said before, when I was choosing, like they were the best school for me, but before then, I never heard of Gilman. And if I had to choose again, though, I would definitely choose Gilman because just how they were, academically sounded, how they were academically sound and athletically sound at the time. If I had to choose another high school, I would go to Gilman again for sure. But to start out my freshman year, I had to do summer school and I had to do workouts. So my whole summer was just filled with nothing but workouts and summer school. So that was required for all freshmen to do was summer school. And then because I had to get acclimated to the school. And then also getting acclimated to the school, I had to get acclimated to the football program. So when workouts came around, I had to get acclimated to the football program as well. So that's when the workouts came around, and the workouts were a bear. They were definitely, strenuous. They were hard. They were challenging. But it got the best of me sometimes, but I was able to keep up for most of the time because I prepared myself. I wasn't like that 4th grade kid that started at KLM who needed help getting around the field, who couldn't do a push-up or a sit-up. I was prepared for the grind, for sure. I was prepared for the grind. I pushed myself. I was able to do well. And I got through that first training session for Gilman. And it was hard. It was definitely strenuous. I remember running the track every day, and that track was so big. It's still there. But that track at Gilman is so big. We had to run that multiple times, big and little guys. So I was a defensive lineman. I was playing nose guard at the time. So that was a bear, but I was like 245, 5'10 and a half, 245 pounds. So I was on the lighter side, but I still was able to get through it for sure. So leading into training camp for my workouts, I was just pushing myself, trying to make sure I was keeping up with everybody, making sure I would do well. And going into the season, I wasn't really expecting to be anywhere, but just to be on the field somewhere, regardless if it was going to be freshman, JV, or varsity. I just wanted to play. That's what I was recruited there for, was to play football, and that's what I was looking forward to do. So at the end, when we get into training camp, it was another strenuous time because the training camp was a wake-up call for me, and it was like an eye-opener for me because it wasn't youth football anymore. It was high school football. Every level you go to is going to be a big jump. It's going to be either from high school to it's going to be like a big jump from youth football to high school to college to the pros. It's going to be a big jump. It's going to be different, but different's good. Change is good. So that's what I appreciated about my journey was about the change. It was different, but it was good. So during training camp, it was hard, going up against guys who were older than me and who were more experienced than me in the high school level. It was very challenging at first, but I was able to push through it. I was very determined to get through it, and I was doing pretty well in my first training camp. I was doing pretty well. I turned some heads for sure. I turned enough heads to the point where the head coach at the time brought me and my parents to the side, and they asked me straight up, like, "Would you be okay?" My coach asked my parents. They asked my parents, like, "Would I be? Would they be okay with having your son start as a freshman on varsity?" And for me personally, I was geeked. I was happy. I was excited. I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready to go. I'll be ready to go because this is a challenge for me. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to play. Now, I was expecting to play varsity, and I wasn't expecting to start at all. But I pushed myself through the workouts and through training camp to get to that point. And we all came to the agreement that it was okay for me to play as a freshman, to start as a freshman on varsity on a nationally powerhouse team. I was ready for the grind. So leading up to the season, we have this team called Archbishop Moeller from Cincinnati, Ohio. Ohio is a very well-known school for football. Overall, they're very well-known. And Archbishop Moeller was a team that was very well-known as well. They were one of the best teams in the country. They had D1 football players and stuff like that. I think they had, at the time, we played Sam Hubbard. Sam Hubbard was there. And he was someone that was a pretty good player. Not pretty good player. He was a great player that we played against. But that was my first game as a high school player. And I remember that game being on ESPN. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, wow, I'm about to play on ESPN. And I remember not like boo-hooing crying, but I remember sitting in some chairs a little bit because it's crazy how far I got to the point where I was able to play on a national stage in front of, however many people were watching at the time. But I was playing on ESPN. And that was a big, blessing to me, And then given the fact we're playing against a great team versus Archbishop Moeller, that was another great opportunity for us to play. So that was nothing but blessings on top of blessings at the time. Unfortunately, though, despite it being a big blessing and a great opportunity, we unfortunately lost to Archbishop Moeller. We lost by like a couple of touchdowns, just like 35-14. And individually, I didn't really do that well. Only had a tackle. But I remember after the game, seeing like people like saying like, "Oh, it's Ellison. He's on TV," and seeing like family members seeing like me on the TV screen and stuff like that, starting and playing, But I just wish I would have done better to help the team win, and I wish we would have won that game for sure because I feel like we were definitely talented enough. But that day, Archbishop Moeller was just better, and it was what it is, and it is what it is with that. Second game, we played Good Counsel. Good Counsel was a team who was also nationally ranked, who was the best team in Maryland. Who was the best team in Maryland at the time, and that was the team that we had to play against. We had to play against the next game at their place. So that was like back-to-back road games for us, which was strenuous, as tough as well. But like I said, we were a determined team. We were, I was determined to play against whoever. I was very competitive, so I wanted the bump. It was a very good bump versus Good Counsel. So when we played Good Counsel, we fought tooth and nail against them. It was a very competitive game, very competitive. Friday night lights, or it started around like 5, 6 o'clock, so it was still a little light outside. But you get my point. It was Friday night lights, on a Friday night. Like, it was just a great atmosphere. Good Counsel is a great atmosphere and all that. So playing against Good Counsel was great. So for me, individually, that's when I elevated from the last game. I didn't do well the last game, but then when I played against the council, I did so much better. I had a couple tackles, probably like 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. And that's when I got my first high school sack versus the council. And I remember like it was yesterday, man. Like when I remember getting the sack and my helmet coming off, I did the Cam Newton pose or whatever he does when Cam Newton back in the day when we played for the Panthers would do the little Superman rip apart your shirt, like that. And I did that. And I remember going to the sideline because once your helmet comes off in high school or wherever, whether it's college, high school, whatever, you had to get off the field. So my helmet came off. I got chewed out by the head coach and the D-line coach at the time, saying like, "Who do you think you are? You can't be doing that. You can't be doing this. You're just a freshman. You don't have no standing here and all that." It was kind of like, yeah, I kind of expected that. I was a new guy, but I was just excited to get a sack. So people had to give me some leeway, but I understand it is what it is with that. But I had a pretty good game individually, and then as a team, we had a pretty good game. We were fighting tooth and nail with these guys, and we got up to them, and we fought to the very end, but unfortunately, a couple seconds left, they kicked the field goal and they beat us by like 1 point. I think, no, it was 20-19 their way. So we unfortunately lost. But when that happened, that sparked something in us. We got tired of losing. It was only 2 games into the season. We still had a lot, of ball left to play in the season, but we were so tired of losing. And it got to the point where we had to make a change. We had to make a change. And for us, that change came after good counsel. It was like, we locked in practice. Back during that time, I would get some bump with the ones because I was starting as a freshman, but I would also be on scout team defense, give the first team offense a look. So I was going back and forth. So I was extremely tired in practice because I was getting bumped as a starter, and now I was getting bumped as a scout team guy. So I was extremely tired. But I was able to push through it for sure. So third game comes around. We played against a team called Don Bosco. Don Bosco was another powerhouse team. We played them at the Navy football stadium in Annapolis, Maryland. And, we played them. And this team was just coming off of 4 years of being just unbeaten. They haven't lost a game in 4 years. So we had to play against them. In that game, I remember it was raining a little bit. It wasn't raining. No, it wasn't raining. But it was just, a pretty competitive, tough-nosed game. I mean, those guys were strong. They were very well coached, solid foundation, good fundamentals, etc. So Don Bosco was a very great team. And we fought tooth and nail with them as well. And, it got to the point where I didn't do that much that game. I tipped the ball on field goal block. I might have gotten on a sack, I believe. I can't remember. I had to go look at the film. But, I did okay. I didn't do that much. But, as a team, we did so well that we actually won the game. We did well enough that we won the game. We won the game 13-6, and we handed Don Bosco their first loss in 3-4 years. So that was a great game as well, and that was a good bump against a very great opponent. So for me, that's when I started getting my confidence in myself. It's like, okay, I'm playing. I got my confidence actually versus good counsel, but then playing against Don Bosco, I got my confidence there because I actually won. I was a part of a team that won and beat a team like Don Bosco, and that's when I started getting my confidence. And I was able to carry it throughout the season, not just not just individually, but as a team as well. We started gaining our confidence, and we ran the table that year. We didn't lose another game. We played against another team called this Christian school out of Charlotte. We beat them senseless. Then we played Loyola. We beat them senseless. We played Mount St. Joe. We beat them senseless. We played Spalding. We beat them senseless. Then we played our 2 other opponents who were the better teams besides us in the MIAA, were Calvert Hall and McDonough. Calvert Hall was a big game for me because we won that game, and we were actually supposed to play on Friday night, but then there was thunder and lightning, so they had to reschedule it to Monday. So we played them on Monday, and we beat them 35-14, I believe. No, 24-14, I think. I had to go back and check the score. But individually, that was a big game for me. That was my coming out party because I had 3 sacks that game, or 2.5, 3 sacks that game. And that was the coming out party for me because it showed that, I was putting in the work. I was doing all the things to the best of my ability, and I was showing, and it was showing on the game. It was showing in the game. So I was doing pretty well, and I did well, and I did well to help the team win. And that was a great game by me and by the team. So nothing but blessings on that. Played against McDonough. Gilman and McDonough been going at each other for centuries. Now it's over a century. But before it was 96 years. So when we played McDonough, it was the 96th game. let me see, 96. Yeah, it was a 97th game, excuse me. It was a 97th Gilman versus McDonough game. So when we played them, we beat them census as well. It was at our home turf. I don't remember doing that much that game. I don't think I did that much that game, but we won the game. We beat McDonough. That was a big rivalry. Calvert Hall's a big rivalry as well, but McDonough's just more of a historic rivalry, for real. So it was a great time playing against those guys for sure during those years. So we had playoffs. And we had playoffs my freshman year. That was the last time. That was the first and only time I ever experienced playoffs at the high school level. And I hate that so much because I will explain to you why in the next episode as to why I hate the fact they took away playoffs, because they took away playoffs after my freshman year. But we had playoffs versus McDonough again. So we played McDonough back to back. We played McDonough in the regular season and then in the playoffs. So in the playoffs, we played against them. It was more of a tight game. It was a tighter game. We beat them senseless, but we beat them pretty bad during the rivalry game. But when we had the playoffs, they gave us a good run for our money. I wouldn't say that we were on the verge of losing because we won 20-8, but it was tougher than it was. It was tougher. It was closer than it needed to be for sure. But we got through it. And we made it to the championship round. And the championship round was versus Calvert Hall. And Calvert Hall, we beat them census twice in the regular season, and in the championship, we beat them like 35-7. So that was the end to our season as a team. And that was the end to my season as a freshman. And it was a pretty good season. It had my ups and downs, hit some learning curves, got some wake-up calls. But I was very blessed to play my first year, and not just play and start on a very talented team, Gilman team, who was nationally ranked, who had other guys who were going to D1 and stuff like that. I was started as a freshman, and I was playing nose guard, only 5'10 and a half, 245 pounds, and I was, creating some havoc. So I was able to do that for sure. And then it's like, it was so great, and I was so blessed to the point where I was so blessed to the point where I actually got awards. I actually got selected to be a MaxPreps All-American. I actually got selected to be second team MaxPreps All-American for sure. And that was a great time for me because it showed that I was among the best in my class. It showed that I worked hard, I was dedicated to the grind, and it showed on the field. And people started to notice. The only thing that not really deteriorated me, but I had some doubts or concerns, was if I was going to be able to play like this in college. And at the time, I know it's probably early to be thinking about college and stuff like that. I'm just a freshman, but I'll see other guys who were freshmen get offers, guys coming out of eighth grade get offers. But I was kind of looking at myself like, I feel like I was pretty good as well, or just as good. Maybe not just as good. No, I feel like I was just as good, or I felt like I was pretty good enough to get an offer, but I feel like the only thing that was keeping me down was my size. So I had my concerns. I had my doubts a little bit. I was thinking I was never going to get an offer. I was thinking I'm never going to go D1, never going to get like a D1 offer and stuff like that. But the following season, that's when everything started to turn around, and it showed that, I can be an undersized defensive tackle, but I can show that I can still play at this level and possibly at the next level at college, despite my size. And everything started to go up. Everything started to go upward my sophomore year. So, but that's the ball game for now. I'll explain more of that in the next episode for my sophomore year, part 2 episode. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in and joining. Just to let y'all know, FYI, you can listen to this podcast on YouTube, but you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Again, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio as well. So make sure you guys tune in if you guys don't want to just listen on YouTube. You want to listen on other streaming services as well. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys for listening. I appreciate you guys for, taking this journey with me on my road to, unheard athlete stories. So appreciate it. Thank you so much. God bless.
I danced through it all. Unheard story, real scars. This is the podcast where we dance through it all.